For the Luftwaffe, one of the primary objectives was, as Colin just said, to knock out the RAF, and that it ultimately failed was not a matter purely of good fortune, as I think has sometimes been suggested down the years, nor of chance. No. This was a matter of in-depth preparation, of getting the right equipment, performing the right training.
Absolutely, all of those things. The fully integrated air defense system, which was developed just in time. You know, we had radar, but the important thing is we knew how to use it. You know,
of Supermarine Spitfire 1As, the first of them, IWM's own aircraft, the Dunkirk veteran, serial N3200. The second of them is serial AR213, which belongs today to Comanche fighters, but is one of the Spitfires that was gathered here in 1968 to make Battle of Britain. Spitfire left straight in behind them. That's the Southern Spitfire, the one in the US Army Air Force's colours, the Mark 16E, back from another engagement. A solitary Messerschmitt Bf-109 played, as they were in the Battle of Britain movie, by a Hispano Bouchon, and this one not just a veteran of the film, but it's in the colours it wore during the movie making. And the airfield defences have also opened up to take it on. And that in itself was a pretty evocative image of Bouchon, low over the fields to the south of Duxford. How many times was that captured on celluloid in 1968, when of course the Chateau set was located over in that part of the airfield? Of these aircraft were deployed to Duxford in early 1968, most of them flown by Spanish Air Force pilots, a few by members of the then Confederate, now the commemorative Air Force, and a few by RAF pilots who came in to replace some of the Spaniards. And this was one of the cache of Bouchons supplied to the legendary Texan aviator Wilson Connie Edwards as part payment for his services in the film, and which was stored on his ranch at Big Spring, Texas, for many years. But in comes the RAF in the form of the two Spitfire 1As. We're going to be rolling the Bristol Mercury engined formation of Lennon 2, and then the aircraft restoration company's Bouchon. with Steve Jones at the controls.
Lots of Steves go around. Ingen Antonelli.
Now we're going to see 5 Mercury-engined aircraft flying together again. This time, though, it's the Blenheim, 2 Lysanders and 2 Gladiators. In they come over the motorway. Look at this. The aircraft that's broken away off the back of the formation is the Fighter Collection's Gladiator 2. Shows us some of the delectable handling of this, the RAF's last new biplane fighter. And of course the early RAF actions over Germany during World War II involved Blenheims, albeit long-nosed Mark IVs, rather than this short-nosed Mark I version. On the day war broke out, aircraft flying from RAF Witten near Huntingdon, a single example flown on a reconnaissance sortie by Flying Officer McPherson, was the first aircraft to overfly Germany after the start of the war. The very next day, 2 squadrons of Blenheims from Wattisham in Suffolk conducted the first raid by Bomber Command of the whole war, attacking the German fleet in their port at Wilhelmshaven. Underneath the 2 Lysanders, the aircraft restoration company's Blenheim comes into land. The sole airworthy example in the world, conducted today by John Romain. And following it in, the Gladiator 1 of the Shuttleworth collection. Of course, we can't talk about the Lysander without explaining why it's most famous, which was for the exploits of two squadrons, numbers 138 and 161, stationed at Newmarket and at Tempsford, in completing in excess of 400 operations between 1941 and 44 in support of the Special Operations Executive, dropping agents into Nazi-occupied Europe, particularly France, and then recovering them once their duties were hopefully complete. The black painted Lysander, that's the one off to the right at the moment, is in Special Operations configuration. It's got an access ladder on the side. And as you see it getting airborne there, you get quite a good look at those huge fairings on the front of the planes, rather like a cricketer's pads. Those actually were intended to serve a practical purpose on this aircraft in the dive bomber role, because they, the idea was, would act as the aeroplane's dive brakes. In the event, when the Swedish Air Force started training for the dive bomber role with its Saab B-17s, they discovered that the aircraft could rarely attain the sort of speed at which you'd need to deploy the dive brakes, and in any case, Saab itself developed a bomb tossing system which negated the need to go into such a steep dive, meant the bombs could be released from a shallower angle. But nonetheless, it's one of the aspects that gives this aircraft such a distinctive appearance. flight of the prototype on the 18th of May 1940 was a bit of an eventful affair. The canopy flew off and hit the test pilot, Clay Smith, on his head. He managed to make a safe landing at the Saab factory airfield at Linköping, even though he had blood streaming down his face. Two crew could be carried on board, the pilot and the observer gunner, housed under a very long, continuous glass canopy. And in the end, 325 of these aircraft were built. They equipped 6 wings of the Swedish Air Force. On the aircraft that it replaced, not surprisingly when you consider that they included the likes of the British Hawker Hart biplane. They were first delivered in reconnaissance form to F3 Wing of the Swedish Air Force in February 1942. B-17s are different units, or S-17s I should say, for reconnaissance, carrying out maritime reconnaissance, naval cooperation, Baltic patrols. idea to restore it to fly in time for Saab's 60th anniversary in 1997, and that it did in June that year. It was operated for quite a long time by the Swedish Air Force Museum in conjunction with Saab, and it was during that time that it made its only previous UK display appearance here at the Flying Legends show in 2005. But last December, it was transferred to the Swedish Air Force Historic Flight stationed at Såtenäs, and here we welcome it back after 19 years absence, coming into land after a wonderful display of its qualities, the Saab B-17A, flown by Ola Norén.
He's absolutely greased it. Wow.
The Swedish Air Force Historic Flight has an absolutely fantastic collection of Saab aeroplanes, including many of its early jets, the likes of the 29 Tunnen, 32 Lansen, 35 Draken and 37 Viggen. We've never welcomed them to Duxford before, and we very much hope this won't be the last time.
Hearty wave there from the observer.
Now, that was really a drawback of the equipment on the Bismarck, and it would be rectified later on the likes of the Tirpitz. It also helped that, as we've seen in this display with the aircraft being flung around with some gusto, that it was very stable and controllable, it turned very tightly. Plus, and this was perhaps one of the key aspects, the Royal Navy trained its crews very well in torpedo delivery, despite the fact that the equipment they had for this on the Swordfish was rudimentary to say the least. They didn't have an accurate torpedo sight to calculate the layoff that was required to attack a moving target. Instead, what they had was a row of flashlight bulbs on a bar level with the pilot's eye line, and the distance between two of those bulbs would represent 5 knots of speed at 1,000 yards range. In for a final pass with a wing waggle. Just 92 Nimrods were produced, and its procurement had followed 4 years of deliberation and vacillation on the part of the Admiralty. So it actually had to come into service in 1931 before production standard aircraft had been properly evaluated. When that was eventually carried out, it showed the aircraft had certain stability problems, though its handling was generally considered at the time to be quite good. 3 Fleet Air Arm squadrons had Nimrods, operating from different aircraft carriers, and they deployed quite widely on them. First Nimrod unit, 402 Fleet Fighter Flight, embarked on HMS Courageous in November 1931 and sailed to the Mediterranean, where in Malta it embarked in HMS Glorious. Later, Nimrods embarked on Glorious after Mussolini's Italy invaded Abyssinia. The Grob Tutor getting airborne now underneath the Nimrod. And they're about to run in over the motorway end. We've got the Avro Anson, that's the twin-engined aircraft in the formation, and with it the Messerschmitt Bf 108, which is actually a French-built NAR 1002. single seat, because this is an ex-Iraqi Fury, and from the same operator, the Republic P-47D Thunderbolt, named Nellie B. And the third aircraft comes from the fighter collection, and it's the Grumman F8F-2P Bearcat.
Spitfire.
Different versions of the same engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp, powering both the P-47 and the F8F. And this Fury, one of the relatively few flying today with the original Bristol Centaurus engine. The fellow naval fighter that so often is paired with this aeroplane in displays as another representative of the ultimate in piston engine fighter technology. Here comes the F8F-2P Bearcat.
And one of our visitors today will be certainly enjoying this spirited demonstration from the P-47, and that of course is Ed Cottrell. We were chatting to him earlier on. He's a veteran of the 9th Army Air Force, and he flew P-47s of course during the Second World War. We're delighted to have him with us today.
A veteran of the 48th Fighter Group, as he was describing earlier on, and this P-47D is painted in the colours of one of that group's squadrons, the 492nd Fighter Squadron, when it was stationed at Ibsley in the New Forest around the time of D-Day. Next on, though, is something of a new formation team for a Duxford display. 3 gorgeous examples of the Beech D17S, popularly known as the Staggerwing, and now in from the left, the 2 P51D Mustangs. The one with the blue nose is named Miss Helen. It's owned by Robert Tyrrell. And it's based here with the Aircraft Restoration Company, though I believe it's departing off slot to the owner's home strip. The other one coming in for a final pass over the motorway is from Fighter Aviation Engineering. It's actually an Australian-built aircraft, built by Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation, and it's been named Jersey Jerk. Representing an aircraft stationed with the 8th Air Force at Martlesham Heath in Suffolk.
And just a quick word for our friends at Planes TV. They're live streaming the show today, exactly as they were yesterday. After the show, the programme joins the huge archive of Planes TV programmes going back to 1989. To watch this show again and everything in that archive, then do visit watch.planestv.com. You'll be invited then to subscribe. It's $12.99 a month, but you can cancel at any time. So that's www.watch.planestv.com.
years old. Over.
And as for the DH9, following behind the little SE5A replica there, it was the engine that gave the most trouble. The BHP Beardmore Halford Pullinger engine suffered from many maladies, severely restricting the aircraft's performance and indeed making it impossible for many squadrons even to mount effective operations on the most basic level. As for the German machines, well, both the Albatross series of fighting scouts and the Fokker triplane suffered from some quite major structural problems. That's why the triplane, in spite of its fame achieved mostly through the exploits of the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, was limited to a production run of just 320 examples. Far more Albatrosses, or Albatri as the plural was often referred to, were built. But they too had structural issues. Likewise recovered out of India for the IWM's collection that you can see on display here at Duxford. It's always a privilege to see it flying, and this is the first time I think we've seen it take to the air as part of a set piece like this with other aircraft of the era. Both the BE-2, which has now landed and come back to the flight line, and the Albatross D5A are exact reproduction built by the Vintage Aviator in New Zealand, and operated today by the World War I Aviation Heritage Trust from the beautifully preserved former Royal Flying Corps airfield at Stowe Murrays near Malton in Essex. On which the detailing is absolutely stunning. And then Paul Ford's DR1, which he spent a great many years building to very detailed specifications. The colour scheme on the Albatross, by the way, which is so distinctive and attractive, is that of an aircraft flown by Lieutenant Otto Kissenbert, a Bavarian who commanded Jasta, or Jagdstaffel 23B of the Royal Bavarian Flying Corps and scored 20 victories.